Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to another episode of the Think Clinical podcast. My name is Hamza. It's always great to be here. Thank you so much for joining us every week. It's another beautiful morning here. And today we are going to be looking at some conversations around just understanding the business life cycle and what that means for you as an entrepreneur when you are going into healthcare business, and how you can, or at what stage you can find funding from which source, because most people really get it twisted and they don't understand exactly where they should be looking when they get in a certain stage of their business, or they don't even understand the stage of the business they are in. So it's difficult for them to go to the right places to get the right type of funding. So today we're going to talk about that business life cycle, for especially for healthcare businesses. And then that would help you understand, especially when you're seeking funding, the type of people you should be going to for funding. So this is going to be another very exciting episode. I'm excited about it. So let's dive right into it. So when we look at this, for most entrepreneurs, the reality is that 75% of healthcare startups fail not because their clinical innovation isn't sound. A lot of the time, the innovations that people come up with, especially in healthcare space, are really sound. But it's because they are seeking the funding at the wrong stage, first of all, or from the wrong investors. So this is what we are hoping to clarify today and to be able to get this clear. Now, let's think about this scenario where we have a very ambitious doctor, we have a very ambitious clinical person who has come up with an AI tool, and this is a real life situation. And this AI tool is supposed to help in the early detection of pancreatic cancer, right? This investor has approached at least 47 venture capital firms, and she has had 47 rejections. The problem here is that she's seeking what we call Series A funding when the company is actually in what we call the seed stage, and this is what I'm going to be clarifying today. So what she had was more of a prototype and just some preliminary data that she was working with, but she was pitching her idea to the market like it's a ready to go. It's a product that's ready to be launched on the market, and it's already generating revenue streams because of the people she was approaching. And this was just wasting everybody's time. So out of the 47 people, she had 47 rejections. And this could be a similar story for a lot of you if you actually take some few steps back and think about why you are getting so many consistent responses from different funding avenues that you thought you should be getting money from. Now, what are these 5 stages? The first stage I like to call the development stage, or the development phase of your business. And this is in healthcare, the development stage is usually unique. So unlike startups in the software space who can just launch an MVP in weeks, healthcare entrepreneurs are dealing with their biology, and they're dealing with regulations, and they're dealing with life and death situations, literally. So it takes time, and the average duration for a healthcare entrepreneur to get through that development stage is usually 2 to 4 years, which is a matter of weeks in like a software development company. The second thing is that a capital requirement, usually a development stage for healthcare businesses, because of all the regulations and all the things that you need to get through, it's usually between $500,000 to about $2 million, depending on what you are building, right? Now, the primary burn rate is in research, is in preclinical studies, and it's initial IP protection, right? And then the success metric here is just proof of concept. You're not trying to tell people you are making money. You're just putting the idea there to prove the concept and prove that this is viable out there in the market. Now, investors at this stage, and the investors you should be looking for, you shouldn't be looking for traditional VCs. You need what we call, or what I call, patient capital investors. These people really understand that healthcare innovation moves at the speed of science, but not the software. So if you are looking at traditional venture capitalists, they are looking at this from a place of funding, from how much am I getting back from this innovation, how viable is this on the market, right? But when you look at this from what I call the patient capital investors, they understand that healthcare innovation is guided by a lot of science, and the speed is determined by that science, not just by the software itself. So Your ideal investors at this stage will involve grant funding, which is the biggest one. If you have grants like the NIH SBIR, these grants have provided billions of dollars to healthcare startups in 2024, and these are the most viable options at this stage for you. Angel investors are the second option, and these could be former physicians, former healthcare executives, people who have successfully exited healthcare businesses and really understand what the dynamics and the speed looks like. They are patient enough to work with you. You could also have university tech transfer offices. And the last one is obviously your friends, your family and friends, who could pump anything between $50,000 to $250,000 to get you at least the proof of concept that you can use to go out there to get the rest of the funding for anything else that you want to do. Now, the pitch at this stage, because the investor at this stage is not buying your business, they are buying your scientific credibility and just the overall market potential in what you are doing. So your pitch should be 70% clinical validation and 30% market need, because at this point you are trying to create, first of all, convince them that there's a market potential, but also most importantly there's scientific credibility to what you're doing. So the key questions you must answer at this stage are: what is the unmet clinical need, and can you quantify it? That's the first thing. The second thing you have to look at is what's your scientific evidence that this solution could work. The third thing you should be looking at is what's your regulatory pathway. And the fourth question you should be able to answer is that who are the key opinion leaders supporting your approach. If you can answer these questions correctly and you approach these right people at this stage, you should be fine. And you should be able to get the capital you need to be able to move to the next stage of it. The second stage of it, or the second phase, is what I call the startup phase, and this is the regulatory and early commercialization phase, right? So here you have proven your concept in the lab, you have the proof of concept now. Now there's a brutal reality here. Can you navigate regulatory approval from the FDA, from any other regulatory body that you need to work with, and prove to someone that someone will actually pay for this? So you're looking at two things. You're trying to get past regulatory hurdles, and you're actually trying to prove that somebody will pay for this concept. So that's the second phase of it, and that's the startup phase. And this is that's why we call it the regulatory and the early commercialization stage. So the numbers are this: the average time during this period is 2 to 3 years, and this phase will usually require capital between $2 million to $10 million. And the primary burn rate is FDA submissions, obviously, because you have to go through those regulatory stuff. You have to do clinical trials, you have to do early pilot programs and initial team building. And the success metric here you should be looking at is that you have gotten regulatory clearance and approval, and you have been able to establish a first paying customer, which means you've been able to identify someone who is willing to pay you for that service. Once that is done, this is what changes. This is where healthcare entrepreneurship gets expensive really fast, because when you now look at this phase, you are looking at a single FDA 501k submission, which can cost you between $100,000 to $200,000. And so you have to now try to look at the investorships, because your first investors in your first phase will not be very helpful for you at this point. Now you are looking at seed stage venture capitalists who specialize in healthcare. Again, seed stage venture capitalists who specialize in healthcare. Then you're just going there to look for venture capitalists. You need to look at those that align with you. So firms like Optum Ventures, Ag Venture Partners, Cosla Ventures, these are the healthcare specialized seed stage venture capital. So the stage is important, and they should be specializing in healthcare. You can also look at corporate venture capitalists like large healthcare companies. Look at Johnson & Johnson, for instance. They are innovative. If you look at Novartis Venture Fund, these are also very important, because they also look at this from a strategic point, whether there's some strategic alignment for them if they invest in this. And you can also look at healthcare focused accelerations, which are like Y Combinator's Healthcare Track, Rock Health, Startup Health. You can look at all those things. So the pitch at this point will evolve. Your pitch moves from 70% clinical validation and 30% market need, which was from the first stage, to the second stage where you now have 50% regulatory strategy, 30% market access, which is still what you're keeping, and 20% clinical outcomes, because you already proven the concept in the first stage. So your pitch at this point shouldn't be talking about proof of concept or clinical validation. It should be, a lot of it is going to be gearing towards a regulatory strategy, and then market need, and a little bit of it on clinical. That's how you are pitching this to these investors. And your regulatory roadmap, you should also understand the FDA classification, timelines, potential pitfalls, who is paying for it, how much are they paying for. These are questions you need to be answering at this stage. What is the CPT code pathway? If you're looking at pilot results or letters of intent, prove that providers or payers are willing to engage with you. This stage is when you start getting all these things together. Your team depth. Do you have regulatory expertise, commercial experience? You can't be a solo founder at this stage. At this point, you need to have a team together. The first stage, yes, you could. But at this stage, you need to have a team that have the different requisite skills that you need to be able to move forward. So this is the stage where you start raising more capital, and you need to identify who you are going to for that capital. Please don't pitch revenue projections based on if we capture. People go and say things like, if we capture just 1% of 50 billion market. That's not what you say. Healthcare investors have heard these kind of conversations multiple times, thousands and thousands of times. So instead, you have to show your bottom-up analysis. You say, we've identified 250 cardiac catheterization labs in your initial target region. Based on pilot feedback, we project 40 labs will adopt the new will adopt in year one at an annual contract value of 85,000, generating 3.4 million in year one. This is how you present your narrative at this stage. Again, you say things like, we've identified 250 cardiac catheterization labs in our initial target region. Based on our pilot feedback, we project 40 labs will adopt in year one at an annual contract value of 85K and generating 3.4 million in year one of revenue. So this is how you present it to them, not saying if we capture just 1% of the 50 billion, this is something, and if it's not a strategy, right? So that's the second stage. Third stage is the growth stage, which at this point you've gotten all your regulatory clearance, FDA clearance has come in. You've gotten your first 10, 20, or maybe 50 customers who have been able to validate that they are willing to pay for your idea. And now the question becomes, can you scale without breaking the company? This is the third stage. So this is the growth stage, and the average period for the growth stage is usually 3 to 5 years. You require capital between 10 million to 50 million. These are very specific for healthcare startups and healthcare companies. And the primary burn rate is in sales and marketing, team expansion, manufacturing scale up, and post-market studies. And the success metrics that you should be looking out for here is predictable revenue growth and unit economics that work. So these are the things that you need to be looking at at this point. Now, this is the reality check. Most healthcare startups hit what I will call the clinical value of death, right? You've proven that it works clinically, but can you prove that it works economically? And this is where most healthcare providers, especially those with a lot of medical background, get frustrated, because the conversation quickly changes here, because they are now trying to, every focus they've had has been to prove that it works clinically, but they are failing to appreciate the fact that it has to also work economically. And this is where most of them will start to struggle and take some few steps back. Now, healthcare has its unique challenges. Now you have long sales cycles. You have selling into hospital systems isn't like selling SaaS, right? So you are looking at 12 to 18 month sales cycles involving multiple stakeholders. You're looking at clinical champions, you're looking at procurement, you're looking at IT, so there's just a lot of hurdles that you need to go through. Now, your investor universe expands at this point, and you're now attracting Series A and Series B venture capitalists. You're no longer looking at seed VCs, right? So your traditional healthcare and general tech VCs, they want to see traction. They want to see you taking over and dominating and making some moves in the market, right? So these are the first stage. You also have growth equity firms. If you are really crushing it and approaching like 10 million in annual revenue, yes, you can look at those. And you can also look at strategic investors. So you can look at healthcare system venture arms, payer innovation funds, pharmacy benefit manager investment vehicles. These are the ones that you can look at this stage, right? So now when you look at this, your page transforms again. Now you are 60% business metrics, 40% clinical outcomes. Now you've gone through the regulatory hurdle at the startup phase, so you are not focusing your pitch on those anymore. Your pitch at this point is now going to be mainly the economics of it. The 60% of it is going to be on the business metrics and 40% is going to be on clinical outcomes. And investors want to see your customer acquisition cost versus your lifetime customer value. They want to see your cohort retention analysis. Are customers sticking around, or they come in, make one purchase and they are gone? Are you growing your usage? They are looking at your sales efficiency metrics. What's your magic number? Your new annual revenue. So all these things are things that they want to be looking at. The path to profitability, even if you are not profitable yet, when will you be? You have to be very clear on all these conversations that you bring up. And the data for this, you have to be able to share metrics like our average sales cycle decreased from 18 months to 11 months as we refined our value proposition, right? You have to be able to say things like customer retention is 94% annually with net revenue retention of 180% due to expansion. These are some of the verbiage conversations that you need to be having. We are at 8 million ARR, growing at 15% month on month with a clear path to 25 million by next year. So you have to be able to have these conversations easily. And this is the growth stage. This is where you start looking at Series A and Series B. So the scenario I gave initially where the person developing the pancreatic cancer AI tool was still at the idea stage and the development stage, looking at Series A and Series B venture capitalists and getting no from everybody, should immediately tell you that you are doing something wrong. Okay. The fourth stage is the maturity phase. Now you have built a sustainable business and you are growing predictably. You might even be profitable approaching it. So now what do? This maturity phase will usually take you between 5 to 10 years. You are looking at capital requirement of 50 million plus, potentially cash flow positive. And then your primary burn rate is in market expansion, new product lines, and potentially you are looking at acquisitions, right? Your success metrics are going to be dialed into market leadership, profitability, and looking at the potential of exits, because this is when you mature. Now, the strategic inflection point, this is where you make a fundamental choice, right? Do you continue to raise capital to accelerate growth, or do you optimize cash flow and profitability? This is where you need to answer that question. In healthcare, unlike pure tech plays, profitability is not a dirty word, so you have to be able to look at that. Many successful healthcare companies have grown steadily whilst maintaining positive cash flow, so you have to pay attention to that. So at this stage, you might be looking at late stage VCs or growth equity partners. You might be looking at PEs, particularly for profit healthcare businesses and technology companies. You want to be looking at debt financing. And you also want to look at strategic acquirers. You are likely to be getting inbound interest. People are beginning to notice you, and people are beginning to look at you as a strategic tool to help them grow beyond what they already have. So what are you optimizing for? You're optimizing for multiple expansion. You're growing top line revenue whilst improving your margins, right? You're also looking at market position. Are you the category leader, or you're a strong number two? Defensibility. What is your moat? Is this regulatory, network effects, data, IP, or switching costs? Which one is it? Your strategic value. Would large healthcare companies pay a premium to acquire you? Like, these are some of the things that you need to be looking at. You need to look at the exit landscape, strategic acquisitions. So 70% of healthcare exits in 2024 were more strategic. So, and this is what you need to be looking at. You need to look at also IPOs. Are you looking to go public? Private equity buyouts, or you're remaining independent? So these are some of the questions that you need to be answering at this stage of your business. But the stage 5 is where you start to decline, or we call it the renewal stage, which is the innovation or exit phase. This is every business eventually faces this crossroad. Market dynamics will shift, competition will intensify, and your core product reaches saturation. So you have to now start thinking about what that means for you in the next place. So in healthcare, it will always come with some regulatory challenges, reimbursement shifts, or technology disruption. These are some of the things that lead you to that decline phase of your company business. So option 1 is renewal through innovation. So you can go back, develop new generation products, expand into adjacent markets, acquire complementary businesses, and pivot business model, right? That's one option when you get to decline phase, to get back on track. The second one is to do a strategic exit. You sell to a strategic acquirer, or you merge with a competitor or complementary company, or you structure when you do a structured wind down if market no longer is viable. So the investor relevance: if you are renewing, you might return to growth stage investors for new product lines. If you are exiting, this is about maximizing value for existing investors and ensuring your team and customers are taken care of. This is the decline phase. So every stage of this, you have your things together. You need to be able to understand this, and that will help you to be able to get this done. So I have a couple of other tools that you may need, which is basically the investor matching matrix. How do you determine what the fit is? These are some of the things that you need to also have a practical playbook that you can also use. These are just checklists of you looking at each stage. Do I have these things in place, and what do I have in place now, and to help you know which stage you are and who you should be approaching. Those checklists will also help. Again, you can leave a comment down below, and I will send these items to you for free, and then it goes on and on with all the other things that you need to be looking at. So we have the last stage of this, which I just want to touch briefly on some red flags that you need to be looking at, right? There are a lot of mistakes that, like 5 mistakes that I have identified that will kill healthcare fundraising efforts, and I've organized this by stages. So when you look at all the like the ones that I feel are universal, and this apply to all the stages, the first thing is that there's always that conversation around unrealistic market sizing. Somebody goes in there and says this is 100 billion market, instead of saying the total addressable market is X billion, our serviceable market is Y billion, and we are targeting Z million. This is how your conversation should be. So this is one red flag that you need to avoid at any stage of the business that you are in, or any phase. The second thing is when you ignore reimbursement. That's another red flag that you need to avoid. So hospitals will want this because it improves outcomes. That's something you would tell your investors, right? But what you should be telling them is that this qualifies for existing CPT code, this, that, right? Which reimburses at this rate, or we are pursuing a new code with a value proposition of this amount of savings per patient. So this is how you present it to them. You don't ignore those reimbursements. The third stage is that underestimating regulatory timelines. Oh, you go to them and say we'll get FDA approval in 6 months. No, you say based on 510K submissions, we are planning for a 9 to 12 month timeline with FDA, and we have built in a buffer for potential questions. So this is how you present to them. The fourth red flag that you should need to be avoiding, and this happens at every stage, is that when you're a solo founder with no healthcare experience raising $5 million, this correction for that is that your team includes clinical expert, regulatory experience, and commercial execution capability, right? And then if you want to see all the other red flags by stages, you can always, again, let me know. I will send this to you in a PDF for free that you can always look at, and you can always understand what we are trying to get through here. Now, the conversation about understanding your healthcare and where it is and the stage and what you need to be doing and how you need to be raising funds at each stage is very important. So to bring this home, you have a concrete 30, 60, 90-day action plan based on where you are in your life cycle. If you are in the development stage, next 90 days, first of all, do a complete honest assessment of your stage using the criteria we discussed. The second thing is that you need to identify and apply for 3 to 5 relevant grants. You can use the NIH, SBIR, or disease-specific foundations. Build target list of 20 healthcare angel investors and draft your seed stage narrative focusing on clinical validation. Okay, so that's if you're in the development stage. This is what you do. I expect you do in the next 90 days. So let's put it this way. What I've said is the first month of the first 90 days. The second month, you have to secure at least 3 meetings with potential pilot investors, get letters of support from clinical advisors, research and develop your regulatory pathway, and then begin building relationships with target angels through warm intros, right? And in month 3 of that, launch grant application, complete 10 plus angel investor meetings, and refine pitch based on feedback. This is what you can do in the next 90 days. If you are in the startup or growth stage, in the first month of your next 90 days, build comprehensive metrics dashboard with all key metrics for your stage. Create target lists for 30 to 40 stage appropriate VCs, develop bottoms up financial model with unit economics, and then also secure intro to at least 10 target investors. In month 2, if you're in the growth stage, you have to look at beginning investor meeting processes, conduct customer interviews to strengthen market validation, refine pitch based on investor feedback, and then prepare data room with due diligence material. And the third stage month of this is also that you narrow to 3 to 5 seriously interested investors, conduct due diligence on investors, check term sheets, and then close that round. This is what you can do in the next 90 days. So what are we saying here? Remember to be ruthlessly honest about your stage. Make sure you match your investor targeting to that stage. Thirdly, speak the language investors expect at each stage. That's why I was very clear on how you focus your pitch at each stage. Build a relationship before you need them. Don't just go to people and start throwing businesses at them. You need to be able to build those relationships. And when those businesses come up, it's easy to walk to those people and talk to them about it. And also focus on metrics that matter for your stage. This is very, very important. So ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the Think Clinical Podcast, an important one for that matter. Please remember to subscribe, like, and share, and we will see you in our next episode.